It was my first day as a married woman in my husband's home. I had barely reached for my plate when my mother-in-law gave a sharp, cold instruction to wait a moment. My husband shot to his feet. From that moment on, my husband and I knew we would be heading out for our first meal as a married couple, just the two of us. I had simply picked up my plate, ready to take a bite, when my mother-in-law's stern glance stopped me cold, making me put it down. She forced me to stand with my arms crossed, watching the men of the family finish their meal before I was permitted to eat. Confronted with this cruel family tradition, the new bride and her husband took a stand that shocked the entire in-law family, leaving. Listen to how it unfolded. On my first morning as a daughter-in-law, I woke up at 5:00 a.m. The hazy light of an early Chicago autumn morning barely filtered through the blinds, carrying with it a distinct, crisp chill. The night before, after a long, exhausting wedding reception in a grand ballroom in Lincoln Park, my husband, Ethan, and I had practically collapsed into bed once all the guests had left. Yet, an invisible sense of dread gnawed at me. Stories whispered among young women about their first days in their in-laws' homes always filled me with anxiety. I gently slipped my hand out of Ethan's embrace, allowing him a little more sleep. Ethan was a reserved man, working in IT. We had dated for 3 years before getting married. He always made me feel safe and cherished. I told myself I had to strive to be a dutiful daughter-in-law, managing the household well so he could focus on his work. I quietly opened the closet, chose a simple, modest outfit, tied my hair neatly, and went downstairs to the kitchen. My mother-in-law, Carol, was already there. She was slicing meat, the rhythmic thud of her knife on the cutting board echoing steadily, perhaps a little forcefully. Seeing me enter, she didn't look up, only offering a chilly, indifferent remark. "Oh, you're up already?" I quickly replied, rolled up my sleeves, and stepped forward to offer my help with breakfast. Carol simply pointed to a basket of unpeeled potatoes, instructing me to take them to the back patio to clean. For the next 2 hours, the kitchen atmosphere was filled with an oppressive silence. Carol occasionally reminded me to slice the bell peppers smaller, to rinse the dishes 3 times, to align the silverware perfectly. I meticulously followed her instructions, telling myself these were just family customs I needed to learn to fit in. Promptly at 8:00 a.m., breakfast was served. Today's breakfast was elaborate, like a small banquet. Fluffy buttermilk pancakes, crispy bacon, scrambled eggs, and a large bowl of fresh fruit salad, prepared from yesterday. My father-in-law, Robert, sat at the head of the table, holding his morning newspaper. Brooke, Ethan's sister, a college senior, yawned widely before pulling out a chair and sitting down. Finally, Ethan came downstairs. He smiled, pulling out a chair for me to sit beside him. Everyone began to reach for their utensils. Out of habit from my own family, I quickly helped plate food for my in-laws, then for Brooke, for Ethan, and finally for myself. I held up my plate, took a piece of bacon, and was about to bring it to my mouth. Just then, a sharp tap of a spoon against a ceramic plate echoed through the dining room, making me jump. The piece of bacon almost fell back onto the platter. Carol lowered her spoon, her face stone cold, her eyes staring intently at me. Her voice, though even, was filled with unmistakable authority. "Hold on a moment," she stated. "In this house, we have rules. The elders haven't commenced, the men haven't been served, and our guests haven't started. The daughter-in-law does not eat first. You might be accustomed to more freedom in your own home, but when you marry into the Miller family, you will learn our ways from the beginning." The entire dining room instantly fell into an unsettling silence. My father-in-law put down his newspaper, cleared his throat, but said nothing. Brooke pouted, secretly tapping away on her phone. My face flushed, my nose stung. A wave of humiliation swelled, choking me. I had never imagined I would be so embarrassed on my very first breakfast as a Miller, all because of such an archaic rule. I slowly put my plate down, intending to apologize and let the matter pass. However, before I could utter a word, a warm, firm hand clasped mine. Ethan sprang to his feet, his wooden chair scraping loudly against the tile floor. His face was taut, his eyes fixed on his mother with unwavering resolve. He spoke clearly and deliberately, each word ringing out. "Mom, this is my wife, not a maid. If having a meal in our own family means having to endure such distinctions, such coercion and scrutiny, then my wife will not eat. I married her to love, to share joys and sorrows, not to force her to bow down and endure unreasonable customs. From today, my wife and I will eat our meals out. On our own." With that, before anyone could react, Ethan pulled me by the hand, heading straight for the door. ignoring my father-in-law's startled call and Carol's furious shouts echoing behind us. Ethan got my jacket, handed me a helmet, and started the car. The autumn wind bit at my face, cold and sharp, but Ethan's hand, holding mine tightly, conveyed a strange warmth. Finally, my tears fell. Not out of sadness from my mother-in-law's rebuke, but from the overwhelming emotion of being unconditionally protected by the man I chose to be my husband. The car flowed through Chicago's busy streets, people rushing to start their day. No one knew of the emotional storm that had just swept through our young lives. Ethan slowed as he turned into a small street in Lakeview, a neighborhood where we often visited a familiar diner during our dating years. The diner was small but bustling with customers. The noisy chatter, the clatter of plates, and the fragrant aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the air gradually calmed my spirits. Ethan found an empty booth in a quiet corner, carefully wiped down the table with a napkin, then gestured for me to sit. He waved to the server, loudly ordering 2 large plates of waffles with extra fruit, not forgetting to specify a side of crispy bacon, just the way I liked it. When the server left, Ethan turned to me. The tension and fierce determination from earlier were gone from his eyes, replaced by tenderness and remorse. He took my hands, his fingers gently squeezing, as if to transmit strength. "I'm sorry," Ethan said, his voice deep and warm. "I'm truly sorry I let you suffer such indignity on your first day as my wife." I shook my head, trying to manage a smile to reassure him. "I'm okay, I was just a little surprised. Maybe Mom isn't used to my presence in the house yet. I'll try my best to get along." Ethan sighed, reaching out to brush a stray strand of hair from my forehead. "You don't need to make excuses for Mom. I know her. Growing up, she endured a lot of hardship as a daughter-in-law to Grandma Miller. Grandma was incredibly strict back then, making Mom serve everyone and eat only the leftovers. But that doesn't mean Mom has the right to repeat that injustice with you. People who have suffered pain should know how to protect others from similar hurt, not become the ones inflicting it." I listened to him silently. A deep admiration swelled within me. Not many men could grasp the issue so thoroughly and dare to confront the patriarchal prejudices deeply rooted in their own family. Most would choose to appease, advising their wives to just endure for peace. One might say smooth things over, another a wife must obey. But Ethan was different, he chose to stand for fairness. "I don't want you to become a shadow of the women of past generations," Ethan continued, his eyes resolute. "We're building our family on love and respect. A family meal should be a place for laughter, where people share the best dishes, not a courtroom to decide rank. You are my wife, the woman who will walk with me to the end of my life. I will absolutely not let anyone, not even my mother, trample on your self-respect." 2 steaming plates of waffles and coffee were placed before us. The aroma of maple syrup and freshly ground coffee filled the air, stimulating my appetite. Ethan carefully squeezed fresh lemon onto my waffles, added a dash of spicy hot sauce, and mixed it well. He picked up the crispiest piece of bacon and placed it on my plate, urging me to eat while it was hot. I ate the soft waffles, savoring the comforting flavor melting in my mouth. This breakfast had no elaborate spread, no grand table, and no restrictive traditions, only me, my loving husband, and a simple meal filled with the warmth of understanding. I realized that no matter how many storms lay ahead from my in-laws' side, as long as this hand held mine, I would have the courage to face anything. After breakfast, Ethan drove me to a quiet cafe by Lake Michigan. We needed time to discuss our next steps. The spacious atmosphere and gentle breeze from the lake cleared my mind. Just as our drinks were served, my phone in my purse began to vibrate incessantly. I checked the screen. A flurry of notifications popped up from WhatsApp. It was the Miller family group chat, including grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. This group usually only buzzed with birthday wishes or holiday announcements, but today, it was boiling with dozens of long messages, sent by none other than Carol. My mother-in-law was unleashing a torrent of fury, expressed through tear-filled paragraphs of blame and resentment. She recounted the morning's events in vivid detail, from a completely distorted perspective. She lamented that she was a diligent mother, sacrificing her entire life for her husband and son, waking up at dawn to prepare a lavish breakfast to welcome her daughter-in-law. Yet, her daughter-in-law, a spoiled city girl, was ill-mannered, disrespectful, and dared to eat before the elders. She even emphasized that I had used cunning and deceit to manipulate her son, making Ethan so infatuated that he dared to defy his parents and leave their home on his very first day of marriage. Below Carol's messages, Brooke, Ethan's sister, quickly chimed in. She shared a screenshot of a status update from her personal Facebook page into the group. The status was full of sarcastic, veiled remarks about modern girls who came empty-handed, were lazy, only clung to their husbands, lacked respect for their elders, and despite their urban upbringing, behaved without culture. The aunts and uncles in the family began to respond. Some advised my mother-in-law to calm down for her health's sake, others criticized me for being inconsiderate, saying it was a family misfortune to have acquired such a troublesome daughter-in-law. Others blamed Ethan for being spineless, letting his wife walk all over him. Reading those sharp words, my heart ached, and a feeling of injustice and helplessness welled up, choking me. I had never intended to defy or create discord within their family. I was merely the victim of an unexpected prejudice. My eyes welled up, and my trembling hand reached to type an explanation. Ethan intuitively sensed my distress. He leaned across the table and gently took the phone from my hand. His brows furrowed as he scrolled through the group chat's content. Contrary to my expectation, he didn't fly into a rage, throw the phone, or curse. Ethan took a deep breath, calmly unlocked his own phone. With decisive taps, he sent a single message to the family group. To Grandpa, Grandma, aunts, uncles, and all family members. This is Ethan. I would like to clarify this morning's events, so that everyone understands my wife, Zoe, is not disrespectful or manipulative. The issue arose from my mother imposing an unreasonable rule, forbidding Zoe from eating until everyone else had. I was the one who chose to stand up for my wife and decide to leave the house because I cannot accept my partner being treated unfairly. Zoe is my wife, the woman I chose and will protect at all costs. I respectfully ask everyone to honor the truth, not to judge, and not to use harsh words to attack my wife. This is a private family matter, and I will resolve it myself. As soon as Ethan's message was sent, the entire WhatsApp group fell silent. No one dared to comment further. Brooke swiftly deleted her Facebook status update. Ethan's resolute and public defense of his wife was like a splash of cold water on the malicious rumors. He placed his phone back on the table, looking at me with a warm smile. The panic within me gradually dissipated, replaced by an unwavering trust in the man sitting before me. The message in the WhatsApp group effectively put an end to any thoughts of moving back under one roof. We knew that facing my mother-in-law's bitterness every day would only erode our love and happiness. That very afternoon, Ethan decided to call a moving truck. We packed all our luggage, clothes, and personal belongings, moving directly into our condo in Lincoln Square. This was the apartment we had bought 6 months prior when both families officially discussed our wedding. Although the interior wasn't fully furnished, with many items still in cardboard boxes, the moment I stepped through the wooden door, I felt a fresh surge of vitality and freedom. The scent of new paint blended with the afternoon sun streaming through the balcony window, creating an oddly peaceful feeling. All afternoon, Ethan and I worked together, tidying up the bedrooms, assembling the TV stand, and tightening screws for the dining table. While I cleaned the kitchen, organized dishes in the cabinets, and washed bed linens, there were no scrutinizing glances, no restrictive rules stifling every breath. We worked side by side, occasionally bantering, our joyful laughter echoing throughout the small apartment. When dinner came, it wasn't an elaborate feast, just a plate of fried eggs, a bowl of tomato soup, and some sautéed green beans. But as we sat across from each other, sharing our simple meal, it tasted better than any gourmet banquet. Equality was evident in the smallest details, where no one had to serve another, only share and cooperate willingly. Around 8:00 p.m., the doorbell chimed. I rushed to open it, bursting with joy to see my parents, George and Diane, standing outside. My dad, George, carried a large basket of fruit, while my mom, Diane, carefully held a container filled with my favorite homemade dishes. Learning that Ethan and I had moved out so suddenly, they couldn't hide their concern and made the journey to visit us that very night. Ethan quickly brewed tea, politely inviting my parents to sit on the sofa. My father took a sip of the warm tea, his kind eyes scanning the apartment before settling on Ethan's face. Your mother and I were a bit surprised to hear you two moved here, my father said calmly. But we support this decision. Young married couples need their own space to build a home. Generational clashes are inevitable. What matters is how you resolve them. Ethan, you behaved like a true man. Your protection of Zoe makes me very relieved to entrust my daughter to you. My mother took my hand, her voice softening with love. Every parent wishes for their children's happiness. If his mother is upset, it's just a temporary reaction when people aren't accustomed to change. You two just live well, love each other, work hard, and time will prove everything. If you live with integrity, you don't have to fear what others say. My parents' loving and understanding words imbued us with renewed strength. There were no words inciting hatred. No blame towards my in-laws. My parents simply taught us to be independent, mature, and to preserve our family's happiness. That night, nestled in Ethan's arms in our own bedroom, I knew that the decision to leave was the best thing we had ever done. 3 days passed since we moved into our own place. Life in the Lincoln Square condo was slowly settling into its peaceful, familiar rhythm. On Saturday afternoon, Ethan had an unexpected meeting at work and said he would be home late. I was at home alone, busily peeling potatoes for dinner when the doorbell rang. Wiping my hands on my apron, I assumed it was a delivery person and walked to open the door without checking the peephole. As the door swung open slightly, I stopped dead in my tracks, my smile fading. Standing before me was Carol, my mother-in-law. She wore a dark silk dress, carrying an insulated food warmer, her face lightly made up and wearing an unbelievably placid expression. "Mom?" I stammered, quickly opening the door wider to invite her in. Despite everything that had happened, she was still an elder, and I couldn't be disrespectful. Carol stepped inside, her eyes sweeping around the apartment before she placed the food warmer on the dining table. She offered a smile that felt forced. "Where's Ethan? Are you home alone?" "Yes, Ethan had an urgent matter at work today, so he'll be home late," I replied. "Did you need something, Mom?" I poured her a glass of warm water, careful with every word. Carol pushed the glass aside, pulled out a chair, and sat down, clutching her small handbag. Her tone shifted, becoming sweet and cajoling. "I brought over some short rib soup with lotus seeds for you too. I've been thinking a lot about what happened the other day. Elders can sometimes be hot-headed and speak unkindly. As a daughter-in-law, you should be generous and forgive me. If you two live out here like this, making do, what will the relatives say? They'll think I don't know how to raise my children." I listened silently, a sense of unease bubbling inside. My gut told me this gentle demeanor wasn't simply an apology. Sure enough, Carol began to reach into her handbag. I keenly noticed her smartphone screen was lit, the rear camera pointed straight at me, and a blinking red dot indicated that video recording was active. She continued to push the conversation, her voice slightly louder now. "Well, what's done is done. As a junior, you also made a mistake by behaving so stubbornly that day. Now, your mother-in-law, have humbled myself to come here with soup to make peace. You, too, should offer a proper apology to me so I can record it to show your father-in-law and Brooke. That's how a family stays harmonious. Come on, say it. Tell me you're sorry." Carol was staging a scene. She wanted to record me subserviently apologizing as proof to send to the family WhatsApp group, to turn the tables and prove that Ethan's previous words defending me were wrong, that ultimately I had to bow down and admit guilt. This hypocrisy sent a chill down my spine. Just as I was about to expose the phone in her bag, the sound of the front door unlocking echoed. Ethan walked in, his arrival breaking the tense atmosphere. Seeing his mother sitting there, he was momentarily surprised but quickly regained his composure. He stepped forward, his keen eyes immediately catching the light from the phone screen peeking out from his mother's handbag. Ethan approached, his hand gently but firmly resting on the flap of the handbag, closing it and completely obscuring the camera lens. "Mom, you came to visit us, but why go to the trouble of setting up your phone to record?" Ethan's voice was calm, yet it held a powerful underlying warning. "If you genuinely want to make peace, we are always willing to welcome you. But if you're using these tactics to force Zoe to admit fault for things she didn't do wrong, just to make her a laughingstock for the relatives, then you're demeaning yourself as a mother." Caught red-handed by her son, Carol's face turned ashen. Her mask of benevolence instantly dropped, replaced by furious anger and profound shame. She snatched her handbag back, jumped to her feet, not bothering to look at either of us. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Now, because of some woman, you dare to defy your own mother. I'll just wait and see how long your happiness lasts." She shrieked, each word piercingly loud. Without waiting for our response, Carol grabbed the food warmer and stormed out the door, slamming it shut behind her. The deafening bang reverberated through the apartment, leaving an eerie silence. Ethan put his arm around my shoulder. He didn't say anything, just let out a heavy sigh. We knew this battle to protect our family's happiness would be long, and the toughest challenges still lay ahead. After that afternoon when my mother-in-law caused a scene at our condo with the soup container, our living space seemed quieter, but within me, a tempest was brewing. In the following days, although Carol didn't appear again, the repercussions of our family conflict subtly infiltrated our lives in countless ways. Most notably, malicious rumors began to surround me. One evening that weekend, As I was busy in the kitchen preparing meatloaf, I received a call from Sarah, a distant cousin on Ethan's side who had been quite close to me since we were in college together. Sarah hesitantly informed me that during recent coffee gatherings and family events, Carol had been constantly crying and complaining to relatives. She claimed I was a gold digger, relying on my city girl charm to manipulate Ethan. She spread rumors that the Lincoln Square condo we were living in was entirely the fruit of Ethan's hard work and savings, while I was just an opportunist who moved in, then incited my husband to abandon his parents. She even fabricated stories that I was lazy, freeloading, and didn't contribute financially, which was why I had time to stir up trouble with my in-laws. Hearing Sarah recount these words, my nose stung, and a surge of anger and injustice choked me. I had never thought of calculating every penny with my in-laws, but being so blatantly slandered crossed the line of my self-respect. I turned off the stove, washed my hands, and walked straight into the bedroom, where our small desk was. I pulled open the bottom drawer, and took out an old, brown leather-bound ledger. This was the book I used to record all our income and expenses from the very beginning, when we planned our wedding and bought our home. Ethan stepped out of the bathroom and saw me sitting blankly under the soft yellow desk lamp. He came closer, putting a hand on my shoulder, asking gently if I was okay. I didn't hide anything and recounted everything Sarah had just told me. I could see Ethan's jaw tighten, his eyes reflecting a mix of exhaustion and anger. He started to pick up his phone to call his mother and straighten things out, but I reached out and stopped him. I understood that empty words would solve nothing now, and might even add fuel to the fire, making me seem like a troublemaker who caused discord between a mother and son. I turned the pages of the ledger, deciding I had to use concrete numbers to defend my honor. Under the bright light, I began to meticulously create a detailed financial statement with a red pen. In the first line, I clearly wrote down the purchase price of our condo. The total value of the apartment was $600,000. Of that, I had withdrawn all my savings accumulated over 5 years of working and added the support my parents had given me for their old age, contributing exactly $400,000 to the first and second payments. Ethan contributed $200,000 from his bonuses and personal savings. The bank transfer receipts, the co-ownership deed, and all original statements were still kept in a red folder. Next, I listed the costs of the interior furnishings, from the 4-door refrigerator, the large-screen TV in the living room, the new front-loading washing machine, to the solid oak dining set we use daily. All these electronic receipts were paid with my credit card, paid off every month with my own earned income. I continued to the second page, where I documented the unspoken truths of our wedding day, which I had intended to bury forever if my mother-in-law hadn't pushed me to the brink. This included the gold jewelry and cash wedding gifts. According to custom, the bride's guests' gifts were kept by her family, the groom's guests' gifts by his family, and our joint friends' gifts were managed by us to cover wedding expenses. However, on our wedding night, Carol had called us down to the living room. Citing our youth and lack of financial management skills, she demanded that we hand over all the cash gifts from both my guests and our shared friends for her to hold. Not only that, the 3 valuable gold pieces my parents had personally given me during the wedding ceremony were also taken by her, claiming she would store them in the family safe for security. Up until the day we moved out, she had never once mentioned returning any of that property. I meticulously wrote down each number, each asset, with great care. It wasn't that I wanted to be petty with my in-laws, but I needed clear documentation to salvage my own and my parents' honor. My parents, who had raised me well, given me an education, could not be judged as having a daughter who freeloaded off another family. Ethan stood beside me, reading each line I wrote. He didn't stop me. He simply poured me a warm glass of water and placed it next to the ledger. Ethan understood that silence and passive endurance, at this point, were no longer signs of respect but rather complicity in wrongdoing. This ledger would be the clearest evidence of my independence and self-reliance, shattering all malicious rumors surrounding the small home we were striving to preserve. That weekend, our small condo constantly received waves of family calls, mostly channeled through Ethan's phone. It seemed my meticulously prepared ledger hadn't even had a chance to work its magic before the pressure from the Miller family reached its peak. After hearing Carol's one-sided complaints, all the relatives unanimously got involved, acting as experienced elders who wanted to advise and correct a grandson they believed was blindly misled by his wife. Saturday morning, as we were tidying up the apartment, Ethan's phone rang, breaking the peaceful atmosphere. Glancing at the screen, Ethan frowned slightly. It was a call from Uncle Steve, the most respected and influential elder in the extended family. Ethan signaled for me to continue with my tasks, then sat on the sofa, putting the call on speakerphone so I could hear, demonstrating absolute transparency between us. Uncle Steve's voice was deep and resonant, carrying the gravity of an elder who intended to use his authority to subdue the younger generation. He began with polite inquiries about their well-being, then quickly shifted to the main topic. He used traditional arguments and age-old wisdom to lecture Ethan. He said that a child who disrespects their parents will know nothing but hardship, and that a family without harmony is a family that crumbles. He emphasized that Ethan moving out right after getting married was an act of extreme disrespect, bringing shame to the family name in the neighborhood. Finally, Uncle Steve concluded by demanding that Ethan correct me, force me to return home, apologize to his mother, and humbly admit my faults to maintain peace in the family. After all, he added, a woman marries into a family, and must adapt to their ways. Ethan sat upright, his expression completely composed. He waited for Uncle Steve to finish, never interrupting. When the other end of the line fell silent, anticipating compliance, Ethan calmly began to speak. His voice was clear, respectful, but incredibly firm. He assured Uncle Steve that he always remembered his parents' sacrifices and upbringing, and deeply respected family traditions. However, he stated that he got married to find a companion to share life's joys and sorrows, not to find a servant to attend to his family's needs. He firmly asserted that his mother forcing his wife not to eat and using archaic rules to assert dominance was something he could not accept. He explained that he and his wife moved out to avoid unnecessary clashes and to preserve their family affection in the long run, not out of disrespect. Ethan's words were sharp, empathetic, and logical, leaving Uncle Steve at the other end of the line fumbling for words, mumbling a few responses, then making an excuse to hang up, unable to offer any further rebuttal. But things didn't end there. That same afternoon, Brooke, Ethan's sister, called. Unlike Uncle Steve's restraint, Brooke was aggressive and shrill from her very first words. She loudly chastised her brother, accusing him of being infatuated with my looks, becoming foolish and heartless, leaving their mother to weep and suffer at home. Brooke lambasted Ethan, calling him a traitor to his family, siding with an outsider to bully his own mother. Ethan didn't put her on speakerphone, but in the quiet of the living room, I could still clearly hear Brooke's piercing words. Unlike the courtesy he afforded Uncle Steve, Ethan dealt with Brooke with the strictness of an older brother. He didn't argue or offer lengthy explanations. He waited for Brooke to vent all her anger. Then, with a chillingly calm tone, Ethan posed a single question that completely silenced all of Brooke's arguments. Ethan asked Brooke if, when she eventually graduated, married, and entered someone else's home as a daughter-in-law, her mother-in-law were to tap her spoon, make her put her plate down, force her to stand with her arms crossed, watching the entire family eat before she was allowed to eat only the leftovers, treating her like a voiceless servant, would she meekly accept it then? Or would she feel humiliated, cry, and call her brother and parents for help? Ethan pressed on. At that moment, would Brooke want her husband to stand up and protect her, or would she want him to side with his mother and trample on his wife's self-respect? A deathly silence fell on the other end of the line. Brooke seemed to have been hit where it hurt. As a modern young woman, constantly advocating for equality on social media, Brooke fully understood how terrible it felt to be unreasonably suppressed. Her blindly loyal arguments defending her mother immediately crumbled before the harsh reality Ethan had just painted. No more arguments were heard. Brooke quietly hung up. Ethan's decisiveness and sharp reasoning were like a sturdy shield, protecting me from the most venomous arrows of public opinion. A sense of peace enveloped me once again, for I knew I had entrusted my life to the right man. The calls of advice and reprimand dwindled, then faded into silence in the following days. I thought everything had temporarily settled down, that both sides would have enough time to reflect and cool off. But I was wrong. That silence was not an end, but merely the calm before a bigger, more orchestrated, and decisive storm that my mother-in-law had assiduously planned. One evening midweek, my father-in-law, Robert, who had maintained a silent and neutral stance since the incident, unexpectedly called Ethan. His voice was warm and calm, yet carried the solemn authority of a father. He didn't bring up old issues or utter a single word of blame. He simply and briefly announced that Carol had booked a private dining room at an upscale restaurant on Michigan Avenue for a family dinner this weekend. He called it a family reconciliation dinner, with the full attendance of the most senior elders from both the paternal and maternal sides, along with the closest aunts and uncles. More importantly, he emphasized that he and Carol had personally called my parents, George and Diane, inviting them to attend. The purpose of the dinner, as conveyed by my father-in-law, was for both families to sit down, talk openly, clear up misunderstandings, mend fences, and strengthen family bonds. Ethan hung up, his face showing clear tension. He turned to me, recounting the entire conversation. We were both mature enough to understand that hidden beneath the veneer of a cordial family reconciliation dinner was a perfectly laid trap orchestrated by Carol. Inviting all the relatives, and especially the presence of my parents, had no other purpose than to create immense pressure from the collective. She wanted to leverage the weight of tradition and the words of elders from both families to force Ethan and me, primarily me, to bow down, admit fault, and dutifully return as a submissive daughter-in-law under her thumb. My chest felt heavy. My parents' presence at this dinner made the situation incredibly sensitive. I wasn't afraid to face my in-laws' relatives, but I feared my parents would be hurt, afraid they would hear criticisms of their daughter for being ill-mannered. I looked at Ethan, my eyes unable to hide my anxiety. However, Ethan took my hand, his palm conveying a reassuring warmth. He said firmly, "We can't keep avoiding this. The more we run, the more reason they'll have to embellish and fabricate. We've done nothing wrong, we haven't violated any morals, so there's no reason to fear a dinner." Ethan suggested we attend this dinner with dignity and our heads held high. This would be an opportunity to resolve everything once and for all, so no one could ever again use the family name as an excuse to interfere in our private lives. Ethan's confidence empowered me. That evening, I called my parents. I recounted the entire sequence of events since we moved out, including the malicious rumors and the call about the dinner. Contrary to my worries, my father, George, and mother, Diane, were remarkably calm. My father told me not to worry. He said they had lived over half their lives, experienced enough ups and downs, and knew how to see through these psychological games. He affirmed that our family, my parents' family, was reasonable and respected our in-laws, but would absolutely not be cowardly enough to let others trample on their daughter. He said my parents would attend the dinner as my strongest support. The days leading up to the weekend passed in an atmosphere of meticulous psychological preparation. I opened my closet and chose a sky blue silk dress, modest and elegant, yet exuding maturity and confidence. I also carefully tucked my financial ledger into my handbag. I knew the battle tomorrow wouldn't require swords or shouts. We would face the storm with truth, with transparent numbers, and with the most resolute attitude. This family reconciliation dinner would be the place to define the boundaries of respect, and I was ready for it. On Saturday evening, Chicago welcomed the first chilly winds of autumn. The taxi carrying Ethan and me pulled up in front of the upscale restaurant on Michigan Avenue. The place boasted an opulent, palace-like architecture. Glimmering yellow lights reflected through intricately carved wooden window frames. A deferential waiter in a traditional uniform courteously led us to a spacious private dining room, quietly situated on the second floor. As we pushed open the door, the room was already filled with people. A large, round mahogany table sat in the center, topped with a lazy Susan laden with an assortment of gourmet dishes. Most of the senior elders, aunts, and uncles from Ethan's family were already present. My parents, George and Diane, had also arrived early and were engaged in polite conversation with my father-in-law, Robert, over tea. The atmosphere outwardly appeared warm and harmonious, but beneath those pleasant smiles, scrutinizing eyes and sharp glances constantly darted towards me, from the moment I stepped through the threshold. Ethan and I politely greeted everyone, from the oldest relatives to his cousins, then chose 2 empty chairs next to my parents. Carol, my mother-in-law, today wore a plum-colored velvet gown, adorned with exquisite pearl jewelry, a stark contrast to her usual stern demeanor. Today, she presented herself as a benevolent and magnanimous mother. No sooner had the hot dishes been served than Carol stood up, personally picked up the communal tongs, and placed a golden, roasted chicken leg onto my plate. She smiled warmly, her voice so sweet and tender it sent shivers down my spine. She told me I looked thin since moving out and must be working too hard, advising me to eat more to nourish myself. Carol's gesture was like a signal, initiating a meticulously staged drama. Immediately, praises for my mother-in-law's boundless compassion echoed around the table. An aunt sitting across from us commented on how thoughtful Carol was. It's rare these days to find a mother-in-law who cares for her daughter-in-law's every meal and well-being like this. The conversation quickly shifted in another direction. The crosshairs began to focus directly on me. Uncle Steve, the elder who had called Ethan a few days prior, cleared his throat and set his glass down on the table. He looked directly at me, his voice grave, full of reproach. He said, "As children, filial piety must come first. Young people are often impulsive, too proud, quick to quibble over trivial matters, forgetting the boundless sacrifices of parents." He subtly reminded me of the ancient saying, "Peace is precious," and that a harmonious family brings prosperity. He suggested that what happened earlier was water under the bridge, and since my mother-in-law had magnanimously lowered herself to serve me food, it was my duty, as a daughter-in-law, today, before both families, to pour a glass of wine, stand up, and offer a sincere apology to my mother-in-law. That way, mother and daughter could be harmonious from now on, and the neighbors would have nothing to gossip about. Following Uncle Steve's remarks, Aunt Lisa, Ethan's paternal aunt, chimed in, using gentle but impactful words. She said that a woman who marries should know how to take a step back. Even if her mother-in-law had strict rules, it was only to temper her daughter-in-law into a capable woman who could manage the household. My act of persuading my husband to leave home, freeloading off his hard-earned money without shame, and showing defiance was unacceptable. Aunt Lisa then turned to look at my parents, making veiled comments that, surely, my parents-in-law must also be very upset to see their daughter behave so ignorantly, bringing shame upon both families' honor. The atmosphere in the dining room suddenly became stifling, the moralizing advice and sarcastic insinuations intertwined, creating an invisible web of pressure that constricted me. My parents maintained their calm expressions. My father, George, slowly sipped his tea, not rushing to refute, offering me a steady, encouraging look. Ethan, sitting beside me, had clenched his hand into a fist under the table. He was about to stand up to defend me, as always, but this time, I gently touched his arm, signaling for him to stay seated. I knew this was the moment I had to face it myself, to break free from these unjust prejudices through my own strength and transparency. The clatter of dishes on the table suddenly died down, giving way to a tense silence. Dozens of eyes from the elders of the Miller family were fixated on me, awaiting a tearful bow, awaiting a remorseful apology to emanate from the lips of the daughter-in-law cornered. In their minds, under the pressure of the crowd and unshakable moral arguments, I had no choice but to submit. But I didn't cry, nor did I show fear or anger. I took a deep breath, relaxing my tense shoulders. I smiled, a polite, measured smile perfectly fitting for someone of lesser standing receiving advice. Slowly, I pushed my wooden chair back and stood up straight. My composed demeanor seemed to surprise some of the relatives. I lifted the glass of water in front of me, my calm gaze sweeping around the dining table, pausing for a moment on Carol's triumphant face, then spoke clearly and distinctly. I wish to express my gratitude to Uncle Steve, Aunt Lisa, and all my aunts and uncles for taking the time to attend this dinner, and for offering such heartfelt advice to my husband and me. My voice was even, devoid of bitterness or sarcasm, yet possessed a surprisingly sharp edge. I calmly stated that, having been born and raised, I had been educated by my parents with strict principles about human ethics. I understood very well what it meant to respect elders and honor parents. Therefore, I fully agreed with Uncle Steve that a family needed rules and discipline. However, I then gently tilted my head, directing a sincere gaze towards the women sitting in the room, including Aunt Lisa and Ethan's other aunts, and with a soft but direct tone, I posed a very practical question. I ask all of you, who are mothers and who have or will soon have loving daughters. Surely, everyone hopes their daughters will grow up, find a good husband, and be loved and cherished by their in-laws. So, let's assume that on your daughter's first day as a daughter-in-law in someone else's home, after a long, tiring day of preparing a feast, when she finally sets the table and picks up her plate, she is reprimanded by her mother-in-law, forced to stop. She is made to stand with her arms crossed, watching the men of the family eat first, treated discriminatorily like a servant, eating last from the corner of the table. Would any of you sitting here feel proud of such family customs? Would you happily accept your own flesh and blood enduring such humiliation? Or would your hearts ache, breaking into a million pieces? My question contained no vulgar words or fierce defiance, yet it was like a bucket of cold water splashing directly onto the emotionally charged atmosphere of judgment. The pretense of a family custom veiled in moral platitudes was suddenly stripped bare, exposing the core of its injustice and harshness. The dining room fell into absolute silence. The aunts and cousins who had just been vociferously advising me to endure now awkwardly avoided my gaze. Some hastily picked up their water glasses to drink, others bent their heads to pick at food, pretending they hadn't heard. No one dared to claim they wanted their own daughters to be treated so poorly. My subtle counter-argument had used their own logic to dismantle the deceptive reasoning they were trying to impose on me. Carol's face, now devoid of its triumphant expression, turned ashen. Her mask of benevolence completely crumbled. She glared at me with fiery eyes, about to accuse me of being disrespectful for using the elders as an example, but I didn't give her a chance to speak further. I gently unzipped the handbag beside me, took out the brown leather-bound ledger, along with a neatly organized stack of documents. It was time for the undeniable facts to speak, to sweep away all malicious rumors about me freeloading off my in-laws, to restore my self-respect and the honor of my parents. I placed the ledger on the glass table, preparing to lay down my final hand. The air in the private dining room of the restaurant on Michigan Avenue was now thick enough to be cut with a knife. The soft hum of the air conditioning unit on the ceiling was the only sound echoing. Dozens of eyes from the elders of the Miller family, who moments ago were awkwardly looking away, now stared intently at the old brown leather-bound ledger and the red folder I had placed on the glass table. I maintained my calm demeanor, loosened my grip, and began to slide the folder towards the lazy Susan in the middle of the table. With a gentle motion, I rotated the glass top until the documents stopped directly in front of Uncle Steve and Aunt Lisa. I spoke clearly, each word carrying the weight of an undeniable truth. I humbly ask permission to address the entire family. Recently, there have been many malicious rumors circulating that I married into the Miller family solely to exploit their wealth and live off my husband's hard work. These rumors not only insult my personal honor but are also a direct stab at the pride of my parents, the people who diligently raised me, provided me with an education, and taught me to be independent. Today, on the occasion of having all the esteemed elders from both families present, I request to transparently disclose all financial accounts of my husband and myself to clarify any misconceptions. I opened the first page of the ledger, where each number was clearly recorded. I pointed to the first line and stated clearly, "The condo in Lincoln Square where my husband and I currently live has a total value of $600,000. Of that amount, I personally used all my savings accumulated over 5 years of working, plus an additional sum my parents supported me with, to contribute exactly $400,000. Ethan, my husband, contributed $200,000 from his bonuses and personal savings. The bank transfer receipts, the co-ownership deed for the apartment, and copies of our bank statements are all right here in the red folder before you." Whispers began to ripple through the room. Uncle Steve frowned, leafing through a few papers in the folder, his eyes scanning the numbers stamped with the bank seal. Aunt Lisa, sitting beside him, also leaned over to look, her complexion shifting from red to pale. I continued to the second page of the ledger. I meticulously listed every piece of furniture and appliance in our home. From the modern 4-door refrigerator, the large flat-screen TV in the living room, the front-loading washing machine, to the solid oak dining set. All these items were purchased using my credit card, and I diligently paid them off each month with my own earned income. I stood tall, sweeping my gaze towards Carol, who was now sitting stunned in her velvet chair. I continued boldly with the matter of the wedding finances. According to the beautiful traditional customs of our society, cash wedding gifts from the bride's guests stay with her family, while those from the groom's guests stay with his. Gifts from shared friends are used by the couple to cover wedding expenses. However, on our wedding night, my mother-in-law summoned my husband and me to the living room and demanded we hand over all the cash gifts from both my guests and our shared friends for her to keep. Not only that, the 3 valuable gold pieces my parents had personally given me during the wedding ceremony were also taken by my mother-in-law, who claimed she would store them in the family safe for security. I emphasized each word, stating that even to this day, as my husband and I have moved out, my mother-in-law still manages all that wedding money and gold, yet has never returned a single penny to us. I then turned the question back to all the in-laws. With all these undeniable truths proven by documentary evidence, do I deserve to be branded a gold digger, an opportunist, or someone freeloading off her husband, as the malicious rumors out there suggest? The naked truth, exposed so bluntly, plunged the entire room into a state of utter shock. Those who had moments ago been lecturing me so eloquently about the virtues of peace and harmony were now utterly silent, no one daring to utter another word. Their eyes turned to Carol, filled with bewilderment and even scrutiny. The fabricated image of a diligent, benevolent mother-in-law being bullied by a troublesome daughter-in-law was now torn to shreds by my transparency. The family reconciliation dinner had unexpectedly become a trial, judging those who had set the trap. Exposed so cruelly and publicly before so many family members, and especially in front of my own parents, Carol seemed unable to bear the immense psychological shock. Her face was ashen, her lips trembling, unable to utter a word. She buried her face in the glass tabletop, her shoulders beginning to shake violently. Sobs, choked and heartbreaking, burst from her throat, shattering the silence of the dining room. Carol wept uncontrollably, tears streaming down her face and smudging her carefully applied makeup. Her voice was broken, laced with resentment and profound humiliation. She lamented that her entire life had been lived for this family, enduring countless hardships and indignities that no one understood, only to be made a laughingstock by her own daughter-in-law at the end of her life. She began to speak of her past, of her first days as a daughter-in-law in the Miller family nearly 30 years ago. Back then, Ethan's grandmother was famously harsh and conservative. Carol had to wake up at 3:00 a.m. to start the stove, haul water, and wash clothes for the entire extended family. At meals, she was never allowed to sit at the main table but had to stand and serve her in-laws, waiting until everyone had finished before humbly going to the kitchen to eat the salty leftovers. There were days, sick and exhausted, when she still had to grit her teeth and work in the fields, and any slight mistake would bring merciless scolding and harsh words. Carol cried, looking around at the older relatives at the table, pleading for sympathy. She said she had to bite her tongue, swallow her tears, to maintain the family order, to give her children a complete family. She argued that the rules she set for me now were nothing compared to the suffering she had endured. She only wanted to teach me how to become a woman who could endure, who could sacrifice for her husband's family, just as she had done. The entire room fell silent as Carol poured out her heart, tears streaming down her face. Uncle Steve sighed heavily, his eyes cast down, filled with pity. Aunt Lisa quickly grabbed a tissue to dab her sister's tears, continuously patting her back to comfort her. Hearing her raw emotions, I, too, felt a pang of deep sympathy. I realized that my mother-in-law was not an inherently evil woman. She was merely a tragic victim of outdated traditions and toxic patriarchal ideologies that had been deeply entrenched for generations. But that sympathy did not mean I would accept becoming the next victim. I waited for Carol's emotions to subside, then spoke in a perfectly calm, gentle, yet firm voice. I said that I truly understood and felt sorrow for the bitterness she had endured in the past. No woman deserved to be treated so cruelly and stripped of her dignity in her own home. But I clearly affirmed that her suffering was a product of a backward past era, not my fault. Your endurance is a wound that needs healing, not a trophy to force the next generation to repeat. I looked directly into Carol's eyes and added clearly, you yourself suffered so much from being mistreated, Mom, so you, above all, should understand that resentment. You cannot use your pain to inflict it upon another woman, making me bear harsh rules to soothe your past wounds. Our generation lives in a civilized society where husband and wife are equal, share, and respect each other. I married Ethan to build happiness together, not to inherit an unreasonable burden of suffering passed down from generation to generation. Each of my words was like a sturdy brick, building a clear boundary, stopping the toxic cycle of mother-in-law, daughter-in-law conflict that had plagued this family for decades. After my profound yet sharp words, Carol seemed to realize she had no further arguments. Her helplessness transformed into extreme indignation. She turned abruptly to Ethan, her son, who had remained silently observant throughout the dinner. With tears streaming down her face, Carol pointed directly at Ethan, loudly accusing him of being an ungrateful son, whom she had raised and educated, only for him to heartlessly sit by and watch his own mother be insulted and humiliated by his wife in front of so many relatives. She bitterly lamented that she had given birth to a son who put his wife above her, allowing an outsider to bully his own family. All eyes once again turned to Ethan. The relatives, who had been silenced by my logic, now seemed to find a last-ditch lifeline. They hoped for the spinelessness or extreme filial piety of a son to salvage some dignity for the family name. Aunt Lisa urged Ethan to speak a word of fairness, saying he couldn't let his mother endure such injustice and humiliation. However, Ethan showed no sign of wavering. He slowly stood up, his tall figure and strong shoulders seemingly shielding me from all the storms directed my way. His face was entirely composed, devoid of anger or embarrassment, only showing the maturity and gravitas of a man who stood firmly on his own 2 feet. He carefully scanned the faces of the elders in the family, then paused for a long moment at his mother's tear-streaked face. Ethan spoke, his voice deep and clear, making a declaration to the entire family. He stated that his parents' sacrifices and upbringing were immeasurable. He would never forget or deny them for his entire life. His mother had sacrificed her youth, gone without food and clothing, to ensure he had what he had today. That was a truth etched in his heart. But he firmly asserted that filial piety did not equate to blind obedience. A child's responsibility was to care for their parents, while a husband's responsibility was to protect the woman who had trusted him with her entire life. He continued to raise his voice, each word precise and resolute. He said that Zoe had done nothing wrong in this matter. She had behaved with utmost politeness, transparency, and fairness. Zoe standing up to reveal the truth about their finances was not an act of disrespect but a rightful action to protect her honor and her own family's reputation when pressured by malicious rumors. He emphasized that the decision for them to live separately was his alone, not forced or influenced by anyone. He wanted his wife and himself to have an independent, self-sufficient living space, away from unnecessary conflicts arising from generational differences. Finally, Ethan crossed his arms, his determined gaze sweeping over everyone. He officially declared that, from this day forward, he and his wife would be entirely responsible for their own lives. Any issues related to finances, lifestyle, or personal opinions would be discussed and decided by the two of them. He respectfully asked his aunts, uncles, and grandparents to respect their privacy, not to interfere, and not to judge. And most importantly, he strongly affirmed that he would never again allow anyone, under any guise of seniority or moral principle, to bully, trample upon, or use outdated rules to hurt his wife. Ethan's declaration was like a resounding thunderclap, sweeping away all manipulative schemes and putting an end to the excessive interference of his in-laws' family. Ethan's sharp and resolute declaration completely shattered the patriarchal atmosphere that had pervaded the private dining room. The elders of the Miller family, from Uncle Steve to the aunts and uncles, were so astonished that their mouths hung open. They were accustomed to using their authority to crush the will of younger generations. Yet here they were being challenged by their own cherished grandson, who meticulously dismantled each of their arguments with keen logic and a composed demeanor. No one could open their mouths to offer another word of blame or lecture. The large room fell into a silence full of embarrassment and awkwardness. Just then, George, my father, who had remained calmly sipping his tea until now, slowly placed his white porcelain cup onto the glass table. The clinking sound was soft, yet sufficient to draw everyone's attention. My father adjusted his suit jacket, then unhurriedly stood up. His face was benevolent but exuded the steady dignity of a man who had weathered life's storms to protect his family. My father gently smiled, directing his gaze toward my father-in-law, Robert, and all the relatives. His voice was calm, warm, yet contained immense inner strength. He said that my family, his side, deeply valued the in-law relationship, and always hoped that when children married, both families would nurture a harmonious bond. He also acknowledged Carol's good intentions and the efforts of her siblings in organizing this dinner today to resolve misunderstandings. However, based on what he had just witnessed and heard, he realized that the two families held many irreconcilable perspectives on life. My father turned to Ethan, his eyes filled with absolute approval and trust. He declared before everyone that he was immensely proud of his son-in-law. Ethan had proven the mettle of a true gentleman, capable of discerning right from wrong, and willing to stand up and protect his wife against the storms of public opinion. He affirmed that as long as Ethan and I loved each other, lived responsibly, and defended what was right, no matter how difficult things became, my parents would always offer their full support. Next, my father walked closer and put his arm around my shoulder, his voice resolute, each word deliberate. He conveyed a message to my in-laws. His daughter, whom he had raised and educated well, was not given in marriage to endure humiliation or to be an unconditionally subservient shadow. Although his family might not be overflowing with wealth, it would always be a stable anchor and a welcoming home for his daughter, ready to take her in at any time. If the in-laws' environment could not provide minimum equality and respect, his daughter had every right to choose a free life, free from suffering. With that, my father gave a slight nod, bidding farewell to my father-in-law with the utmost politeness. My mother also stood up, picked up her handbag, and gently took my hand, pulling me closer. The four of us, my parents, Ethan, and I, turned and walked away from the dining table together. We held our heads high, taking proud and self-assured steps as we left the upscale restaurant. Behind us, the extravagant feast lay untouched. The relatives of my in-laws bowed their heads, avoiding each other's gazes. The meticulously staged family reconciliation dinner, intended to break our spirits, had ended in a dismal failure, leaving my mother-in-law with a costly lesson about the limits of manipulation. Months passed since that tumultuous family reconciliation dinner. Zoe and Ethan's lives in their Lincoln Square condo had completely returned to their accustomed peaceful and serene rhythm. The blaming calls, the veiled messages in the family WhatsApp group, they had all vanished as if they had never existed. The dramatic curtain had fallen, returning to us a truly free space to nurture our family's happiness. The embarrassment and failure before the entire family that day had dealt a powerful blow to Carol's psyche. After days of self-reflection in her room, coupled with thoughtful analysis from my father-in-law, Robert, she gradually recognized her own mistakes. She understood that she had loved in the wrong way, allowing deeply rooted patriarchal ideas from the past to turn her into an autocratic mother, making her lose control and almost losing the affection of her only son. Although her immense ego still prevented her from humbling herself to directly apologize, she chose to step back. She no longer dared to openly interfere in any of our decisions, nor did she use her elder status to create difficulties. Her silence and maintained distance were a tacit concession, a forced respect that we had to earn with our courage. On a Friday evening, the sunset cast a warm orange glow over the glass windows of our high-rise condo. The autumn breeze wafted through the balcony, bringing with it a pleasant, crisp coolness. In our small kitchen, filled with melodious music, Ethan and I were preparing dinner together. There was no gender segregation, no rules of husband as master, wife as servant. Ethan rolled up the sleeves of his white shirt, meticulously picking herbs and cleaning pieces of fish. I stood beside him, seasoning the sour hot and sour soup, while telling him amusing anecdotes from my workday. Our joyful laughter intertwined with the gentle gurgle of running water and the sizzling sound of oil in the pan, creating a symphony of overflowing peace and happiness. Precisely at 7:00 p.m., dinner was served on the neat oak table in the center of the room. The meal was simple: braised fish, hot and sour soup with pineapple, and a fragrant plate of sautéed green beans with garlic. Yet, it exuded an unusually tempting aroma. Ethan pulled out a chair for me to sit, then circled to the opposite side and sat down properly. Under the warm yellow light, I looked into the eyes of the man of my life, deeply feeling the blessing and peace present in every breath. He picked up the serving spoon, dished out a bowl of white rice for me, then carefully placed the choicest, boneless part of the fish on top. I smiled back, serving him a tender piece of braised pork belly. There was no forceful tapping of spoons, no scrutinizing gaze about rank, no humiliation, no tears waiting for the men to finish before daring to eat. At this dining table, there was only equality, love, and the most sincere sharing. We raised our bowls of rice together, joyfully savoring the fruits of our shared labor. I suddenly realized that a woman's true place in a family is not in the kitchen, fussing over leftovers, nor is it to submissively shrink into a corner of the table to appease societal prejudice. Her true place is to sit equally with her life partner, together enjoying the full flavor of a life of freedom, love, and respect. The storm of patriarchy had permanently receded, leaving our small home with a clear, sunny sky and radiant warmth. Dear audience, as the tumultuous journey of this young couple concludes, perhaps in each of our hearts, a complex array of emotions about family affection and interpersonal conduct lingers: the embarrassment of the mother-in-law or the proud strides of the daughter-in-law. This is not simply a victory within a household but, more importantly, a profound awakening about how we treat each other under one roof. Perhaps through this story, we realize that blind endurance and sacrifice have never been the universal key to lasting happiness. The bitterness and indignities suffered by previous generations should serve as a lesson to foster compassion, not as an excuse to inflict that same hurt upon women of the next generation. Furthermore, family happiness is only truly stable when built on a foundation of equality, understanding, and mutual respect. In such a home, a woman is not regarded as a shadow, serving unconditionally, and a man truly understands his role as a pillar, bravely standing up to protect his partner against all the storms and rumors of public opinion. Never use the pretense of tradition, seniority, or love to bind and torment those closest to you. Please let go of harsh prejudices and rigid dogmas, so that every family meal remains a peaceful haven after the daily storms, a place filled with warm, sincere smiles, rather than a courtroom judging rank and status. Thank you, dear audience, for taking your valuable time to listen to today's complete story. We wish you abundant health, peace, and happiness with your family.